So if we can go to the next question, which I think throws us, so the limits, and I'm going to read this one out as a special treat, but start voting. So what limits should there be on synthetic life we develop? We should not develop any. See if I can get all the way through before, see if you can get all the 90 votes in before I finish. Not develop any at all. Single-cell organisms only, e.g. bacteria. Nothing more advanced than simple multicellular organisms. We've picked on seaweed, similarly at random. Only develop systems and organisms that cannot reproduce. No limits at all. That's not the song. And finally, still quite legitimate response, don't know. Way ahead of you this time. And again, I'm going to get, once we've got to the 90 plus, if I can get you to hold before you reveal, Ben, and we will go for, I'll see what the panel think. That's the other Ben, not this one. And as soon as we've done that, we'll go to the gentleman right in the back row there as well for his. I think it's just a couple of you thinking, I'm just going to sit back and see how long before I vote. It's only a button, don't be afraid. 89. Oh, the power. Now, come on, you know who you are. No, we've got to 90. They're nice people, all of them. Okay, so before we reveal, can I just start? Richard, how would you, 91 even. There's two of you. Okay.
I went for number 4 because it seems to me that if we do develop these things and they're not capable of reproducing themselves, it gives us time to think to the next step. And I think that if we did develop something that, in fact, raced away from us, the way rabbits did in Australia when they were admitted, things like that, there are lots of examples of things that we didn't intelligently anticipate. So I'm maximalist in the possibilities here, but I think that would be the stopping place for me.
So there's quite an interesting reversal here, because of course when we were talking with GM, when it was originally introduced, it was all this stuff, terminator genes, that's a terrible thing because we're selling people things, and of course, but with synthetic biology, it might be that it's better to have that. Joyce?
I voted for no limits because I didn't want to vote for any of the actual limits you've got there. And I think we have to do it on a case-by-case basis, and we have to consider each development and the properties. And you know, for some things, the fact that they can reproduce will be where the value lies. And if we can ensure that they can reproduce safely, then maybe we can control that reproduction in some other way. So I'm not really in favour of absolutely no limits, but I would.
Okay, well, let's give you a fictional 7th option, which you can write in. Your other option would be what then?
It would be case-by-case limits. It would be between 4 and 5. That some things should be allowed to reproduce, because that will be where the value lies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for the panel and the audience, there's option 4.5 as well. Ben?
I voted for don't know because, without being facetious about the whole business, I genuinely don't know what life is, and it's hard to define. I would argue that reproduction isn't necessarily a hallmark of life, and so if we're worried about things potentially getting out of control, that could happen in non-reproducing systems potentially. So I think that's one of the things we need to start to think about, whether the question of what living is something that we can define. We should certainly debate it. I'm not sure we can define it necessarily.
Right, so you don't want to frighten people, but you're pointing out that things can get out of control in ways we may not have thought of yet. That's good to know. Jim?
I also voted for don't know, but for the reasons that Joyce mentioned, that it should be done, and it is done under a case-by-case basis at the moment, and because at the moment, what's a synthetic life form are we talking about? Are we talking about something which is non-biological or something which is re-engineered, which has a continuum with our existing regulations, so that it would already be covered, which would be on a case-by-case basis.
Right, okay, so that's, if 50% of the panel are challenging the set of options we've had, then maybe we need to rephrase this. So I'll be fairly forgiving of the audience if you don't fall into any of these categories. Can we reveal how the 92 people voted? Okay, so quite a substantial, interesting, 21% were going for don't know, which is the highest for don't know we've had, but right up there, all the way to not letting things reproduce, and 32% saying only develop what cannot reproduce, and 32%, hang on, I'm reading that right, no limits, it's slightly squint. Can I just ask, I'll just do it on a show of hands, if there had been an option 4.5, if it had been kind of on a case-by-case basis, how many would have voted for that? Aha! I'm terribly sorry that one just didn't occur to us when we were doing it. So, hey, this is all part of the learning process. That's what we're here for. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, the gentleman up there who's been waiting ages to ask a question or point, I hope we've got the microphone to you already.
I wanted to comment on what Richard said about the ethics of like the whole idea here. I mean, if we look back in the history of humankind, especially also like in relationship with religion, and see what kind of relationship religion always had, or like, let's say we start with Galileo, for example. So we had always questions we couldn't answer, and then religion was always trying to provide an answer, right? And then there were scientists actually trying to question those borders which were set by the religion or by science or ethics or however you want to define it. And then we figured out what was happening, and then a new border came up. I mean, we started with astronomy. It was always something, you guys were very, very strict about it, and it didn't harm anyone, right? It was actually a huge progress for humankind. Then the other thing, autonomy, like study of the body, of the blood flows, everything. The same thing, religion was also being very, very against it. And then, like, medics did that, and we progressed as humankind. So I think actually, like, if you look back in history, and we're always asking this question, like, how dangerous is science? Science by itself is actually not dangerous at all. I think there's some completely different reasons why we, let's say, develop things like the atom bomb and stuff like that. But science is actually not the issue or not the problem. It only tries actually to advance humankind, and that's I think is a very high morality about what we're trying to do in science.
Ben?
I don't have any problems with that. I mean,
right.
I'm less religious, I think, than you think I am.
But Ben and Jim, does that wash? Can scientists in the field of synthetic life kind of go, hey, we just do the science. What you do with it, that's up to you?
I don't think we have that luxury. Scientists are members of society, and I think one of the issues is we keep doing this with science. We stick it in a box. We talk about public understanding of science. We have science programs. There are so many aspects of life where we wouldn't do that, and I think one of the things that weaken science and weaken society is that we consider it as a separate part. You know, often if you are not generally aware of aspects of literature or discussion about creativity or art, then you're viewed as a Philistine, whereas there are aspects of science that are as aesthetically important, not just intellectually important, that we should all know about. So I think making it a whole and not considering it as being something separate or divorced from religion or any other part of society is the key, not saying that it's pure and going forwards.
So this is the flip side of the CP Snow, if I can get a little bit intellectual about this. It's rather than kind of going, all these arty intellectuals who don't know about science, it's also important the scientists are aware of the wider scope of their work. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And that part of being part of society is the key to this. It's almost an artificial discussion to say, is science a moral platform, a moral area? It's a part of society. It must be. It must consider morals and ethics. And to put it off on a pedestal is just wrong. It seems counterintuitive to me. So.